The developments, because once again US President Donald Trump seems to be singling out and targeting India. He's now signed the latest executive order imposing 25% additional tariffs. This is separate from the 25% tariffs which he announced previously, and what he now calls as a penalty for continuing to buy Russian oil. What this basically means is that India now faces one of the highest tariffs as far as that is effect, but the additional 25% announced will now come into effect from the 27th of August. Here is where India stands on the tariff table, and it is now sharing the top spot with Brazil. Let's put that out, especially when it comes to the figures is now concerned percentage-wise. So it was previously 25% that was announced. There was an unspecified penalty as well that was announced by the United States. Donald Trump has said that there was a massive trade deficit with India as it also continued with its business of purchase of oil and energy from Russia. And that was a kind of a way that protest was raised on part of the United States, saying that India was aiding a war machine like Russia. Now, last evening, in fact, it was already night there in the United States, and we're looking at this order suddenly that came out of nowhere, 25% additional tariffs that has now been imposed on India. And this comes on the table, the top of the table, with India and Brazil both having 50% of the tariff that is now going to be imposed on part of United States. 30% followed by South Africa, Vietnam 20, Indonesia 19, Japan, South Korea at 15%, UK at 10%, multiple countries who are already negotiating a trade deal with the United States of America as far as when it comes to lowering of the tariffs. But Donald Trump, as far as when it comes to India is concerned, has already warned that there would be retaliatory reciprocal tariffs if India decides to hit back. Now, on being asked in the latest statement, Indian officials have said that there are other countries that are buying. Indian officials have said that there are other countries that are buying, purchasing Russian oil, like China, for instance. Then why only is India being targeted? Why is there a 90-day pause that has been given for Beijing? Why is there a window that has now been kept open for its adversaries like China? Why are you singling out India for these additional sanctions? The US president, however, says that it has been only 8 hours. So let's see what happens. You're going to see a lot more. You're going to see so much secondary sanctions.
Let me go, please.
Indian officials have said that there are other countries that are buying Russian oil.
It's okay.
Like China, for instance, buying more.
Yeah.
Why are you singling India out for these additional sanctions?
It's only been 8 hours, so let's see what happens over the next.
Sanctions.
You're going to see a lot more.
So this is a taste.
You're going to see a lot more. You're going to see so much secondary sanctions. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. So let me introduce Tushar Gupta joining us here on the broadcast. We also have Ajay Dua, the former Secretary Ministry of Commerce, joining us here on the broadcast. Good morning to you, gentlemen. My colleague Srinjoy is also connected with us. Mr. Dua, as far as 50% at par with Brazil, because these are multiple countries who are also part of the BRICS platform, and Donald Trump here seems to be making his point clear that he seems to be targeting India in particular. What changed, and should India continue to push for a trade deal with the US?
Samantha, for having me.
Yes, sir.
I think President Trump continues. President Trump continues to be upset with some recent. And this is a reflection of that. First, the 25% tariff, and then the additional 25% tariff, with continuing to buy oil from Russia, that he might review it in 21 days if India were to stop buying the large amount of 35% of its requirement, almost 2 million barrels a day. He would stop it. The question is what India has raised yesterday, and it's been all along said, that is tariff or are tariffs an economic instrument for him to fill up his deficit, what he's been worried about all this while, one could understand. Or is it a political instrument Now it's being used. The additional 25% which he has imposed and to come into effect, as you mentioned, on the 27th of August,
yes.
It is merely and a straightforward political instrument. Political against Russia, saying if you do not stop your fight or your war in Ukraine, I would do this, I would do that.
But is this the changing political scenario as far as the global access situation is concerned? Because when the imposition, just before that, we are looking at the US envoy also meeting Vladimir Putin, India's NSA Ajit Doval, who's also there in Moscow. Lots more has been happening, and Donald Trump seems not to be putting out as far as secondary sanctions on India is also concerned. So lots more happening. What has exactly irked him? What has exactly offended him? We'll talk about that as well in detail. But we have another round of breaking update coming in, reiterating that Indian imports are based on market factors and its national interest. The MEA once again has now called the additional tariffs as completely unfortunate. Let's put out, especially when it comes to some of the excerpts from the statement. This is a strongly worded statement that has been issued by the MEA just some time after the US imposed additional tariffs of 25%, an executive order that was signed by Donald Trump. The statement by the MEA, which is the Ministry of External Affairs, goes on to say that the United States has in recent days targeted India's oil imports from Russia. We've already made it clear our position on these issues, including the fact that our imports are based on market factors and are done with the overall objective of ensuring that energy security of 1.4 billion people of India. That means keeping national interests above all. It is therefore extremely unfortunate that the US should choose to impose additional tariffs of India for actions that several other countries are also taking in their own national interests. So why is India being singled out? Why is India being targeted? We reiterate, as far as when it comes to India's statement is concerned, that these actions are unfair, they are unjustified, and they are unreasonable. And also, India has now made it clear that India will take all actions necessary to protect its national interests. Well, this has been as far as one of the strongly worded statements that have now come in from the Ministry of External Affairs. Let's get in a word from Srinjoy as well, who's connected with us. Srinjoy, there is still some time as far as, when it comes to the first 25%, tariffs that comes into effect from the 7th of August, the additional tariffs that have also now will be kicking off in some time as far as by the 27th of August. And that gives India the window. But that is also coming at a time when there would be negotiators who would be traveling, that would be pushing for a trade deal with India.
First of all, Donald Trump often uses these statements and these orders like a negotiating tool. He has always been a very transactional president. About that, there is no doubt. But India will make several points during the negotiations. First, America itself had said that when India buys Russian crude, refines it and sells it to America, America treats it like Indian petroleum. Secondly, when India buys Russian crude, the world crude prices per barrel remain lower. Now then, if that is what America has said, why this additional penalty? Secondly, the point India will make is that because of the two wars, one between Russia and Ukraine and the other in the Middle East, prices of three things, fuel, fertilizers and food, have shot up. And this is difficult for South countries, not just India. And India, with 1.4 billion people, has to ensure that its energy needs are looked after. And there is no choice but to go to Russia for oil that is comparatively cheaper. So that's really the point. If the war ends, then the prices of petroleum come down and India can buy more easily, breathe more easily, and buy from the open market. Now, what India is doing just now is buying from the open market. Wherever the prices are reasonable, India goes there. And India is a growing country. India is a country that still needs petroleum and also coal. and India's per capita income is still about $3,000.
So as
now,
far
all
as the
these
purchases
points,
are concerned, these are the market factors that actually guide, not when it comes to political influences or pressures, that it seems that the bullish tactics are now being taken up by the United States of America. We'll just come back to you on that as Mr. Dua and Tushar and Shinjoy also continue to be with us. We talk about significantly 3 days before the deadline for 50% tariff to take effect, the U.S. negotiating team is expected to land in New Delhi, and this is exactly what I was talking about, to participate in the 6th round of talks, which means India still has a 21-day window to change Trump's very fickle mind. Now the opposition, however, has made it clear in the government here who are already trying to corner it. The Congress has revived the weak Prime Minister memes, once again using the Trump template to attack the Modi Sarkar. Their social media timeline is flooded with mockery for India, and the commander-in-chief is also attacking the Prime Minister. Rahul Gandhi saying that PM better not let his weakness override the interest of the Indian people. One wonders what is the basis of this presumption, because if anything, the rising rates only show how India is not bowing down to Trump's bullying tactics and continues to trade openly with Russia.
No longer surprising is that countries like the US can think that they can get away with blackmailing us, which is an unfortunate reality. Having said that, we hope that the Prime Minister, not that he's done it in the past, but flexes his muscle and overcomes his weakness and stands up to this bullying. The entire country is more important, our business interests are more important than his fake self-image.
The Prime Minister Modi doesn't have guts to retaliate in the same coin. What are you doing? So had there been government of Congress, and of course now the country needs a leader like Prime Minister like Rahul Gandhi. He is the one who can reply back to US in same coin.
But there is one leader who stands out, rather who has already stood out, especially when it comes to his steadfast support with India's line of highlighting the US double standards. This is Shashi Tharoor. He is calling for India to give US a taste of its own medicine by imposing reciprocal tariffs.
There is unfortunately a certain double standard involved. Clearly this has not been a particularly friendly gesture from a country we thought was well disposed towards us, our administration that we thought was well disposed. Very clearly we have to act accordingly, and we will have to learn our lessons from this experience. I think there is certainly a likelihood there will be some pressure within India now to impose comparable reciprocal tariffs on American exports to India. So I think we're going to have to really start looking at other trading partners much more in these circumstances.
Well, Tushar, what's your take? Mr. Dua was probably hinting that something may have irked Donald Trump. Now here we are hearing one of the political leaders in the opposition saying that the Prime Minister doesn't have any guts to take on Donald Trump. Is it what happened in the Parliament recently, where India has denounced any foreign interference when Operation Sindoor was on, that probably led to Donald Trump raising the tariff hike on India?
There are a lot of factors we need to talk about. The first one is that Russian oil is just a part of the problem for Donald Trump. We have been importing Russian oil for more than 3 years now, and it's completely driven by market dynamics. Of course, if we relied only on the Middle East for our oil, there would be high inflation in India, which would have been directly passed on to the households. Even 3 years ago, around April 2022, May 2022, the same Congress was in opposition to the idea of importing oil from Russia. But for the past 3 years, they were silent. They had made their peace with the decision of the government of India. However, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are reportedly meeting later this month. That's what the news reports say. It's still not confirmed, but that's what the news reports say. Now, let's assume for a moment that the oil goes out of the equation, that Donald Trump is okay with India buying Russian oil. There is still another point of contention, and that is the unrestricted access he wants for American companies to our agri and dairy sector. This is where I think India will have a big problem, because those farmers from America, the kind of yields they have, the kind of technology they have, they'll be in a position to undercut our farmers in terms of pricing, and that is the vulnerability the government doesn't want for our farmers. So this is also another problem that we'll have to deal with in the coming days. Now, number three, important question everyone is asking. Why didn't China get the same level of tariffs? Well, China has a leverage. China is already weaponizing its rare earth minerals, which are critical for manufacturing for American companies. So China already had a leverage. They used it and they've got a deal for themselves.
Yes.
India, however, doesn't have any such leverage right now apart from a market size. So these are the factors we have to look at.
Yes, but China is an adversary. You know, he's not completely pointing out as far as additional sanctions that could be imposed on China. He says maybe something would happen. This is too early to say on that. But as far as if the same regard and leniency that has been given to China, why not that been given to, a friend like India? Is Donald Trump ready to risk the friendship with India? Thank you very much, Mr. Dua and Tushar, for joining in. Of course, appreciate your point of view. Srinjoy continues to be with us because this is where the factor and the doctrine of India first lies. That U.S. President Donald Trump seems to be squirming over this. Can he handle the new global axis that seems to be changing, who doesn't follow its rules? Just yesterday, India has exposed a stunning case of American hypocrisy, leaving the world's most outspoken leader mumbling. India pointed out that an inconvenient truth about U.S. trade with Russia and left Trump tongue-tied.
India says that the U.S. imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah.
However, at this time when Donald Trump has imposed additional 25% tariff on India, India is now busy strategizing its response. As we speak, the NSA Ajit Doval, who is in Moscow, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to visit China later this month. And while an official word is still awaited, Prime Minister is likely to attend the annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the SCO, in what will be the Prime Minister's first trip to the country after Galwan clashes. Meanwhile, industry experts are of the opinion that Indian economy is resilient enough to deal and to tackle with such external shocks.